Tonight's presentation is about restoring ecological and social capital, principles and methods that have worked for me. And I wanted to try to make sense of what I was trying to do, so I put this scheme together here. And the important part to look at actually is the left-hand side of the screen. There'll be a quick introduction, what we've done in the past, what we're doing now, and where we want to go in the future. So that's kind of what I'd like to cover tonight. And I was asked when I put this presentation together for the Bioneers conference in Madison, I was asked to tie this into sustainability. So when we think about these things, there are three ways to proceed with any process that you do. The first is exploitively, where the capital is being liquidated and the whole is being diminished. The second way to proceed, which is better, is sustainably. The capital is maintained. There's an even keel. It's neither created nor diminished. And the third way to proceed would be restoratively, where social capital, social and ecological capital is created and the whole is increased. So when we try to do stuff, we should try to do it in a restorative manner where we are actually building up the ecology and the social structure. Now, I'd like to tie this into some of the principles of ecology, and the first, everybody probably knows this, so I'm going to breeze through this part, but holism, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's the first principle of ecology. Second principle of ecology is diversity, and diversity is about creating niches and options and opportunities. Anytime there's a niche in nature, some animal or some plant comes in and inhabits that niche, and it consumes biomass, and it consumes things, and it exudes things, and those things create more and more complexity in nature, and then more things can move in. And you can start out with a piece of sand, and a little weed will grow up, and it'll create shade, and it'll drop its leaves, and organic matter will be deposited in the soil, and more things can live. So it's about diversity, the second principle of ecology. And then the third principle of ecology is interdependent relationships. These are relationships that are mutually beneficial. Everybody is benefiting in the relationships. It's about cooperation. It's not about exploitation. It's not about competition. It's about creating synergy. And then three conditions to meet. Whenever we do anything, we should try to reduce the inputs that go in. We want to reuse, we want to recycle, we want to repurpose, and we want to repent because we've been very, very bad.
Is that those cell phones too?
Mm-hmm. And we want to restore capital. We want to do things so that we actually build the social and ecological capital. We don't want to diminish it. We want to build things up, both the ecology and the social structure. And then finally, I think we should try to invest in human dignity to create meaning and purpose in people's lives. So, this man here has made a huge difference in my life. That is Dr. Karl Henrik Robert. He's basically the author of The Natural Step. The Natural Step in and of itself has been a very motivating factor in my life, and this is the very well-known Natural Step funnel. Two trends that are coming together, and it's about learning how to live within nature's bounds. And the four systems conditions that the Natural Step is based upon. This is systems condition 1, and we all know this, so I'm going to continue right on through. But for those that aren't familiar with the Natural Step, we don't have time to cover it tonight, but it's a very good framework for understanding social and ecological sustainability. And the basic 9 human needs. This is part of the Natural Step. This is the fourth systems condition. I was privileged to work with Torbjorn Latte, and I was his chauffeur for a week when he was in Wisconsin, and I learned so much that week. Just being his personal aide, it was a treat. But let's get down to the fun part. A lot of what I've done has occurred in the county of Jefferson, and on Prairie Dock Farm. It's our family farm. And they built a new freeway for us so that I can get to work faster. And there is our farm, and there's a lot of diversity on that farm. And let's explore that diversity a little bit. First of all, has about a 50-foot gradient to it from the very top to down to the river. And it's zoned A1 Class 2 prime agricultural soils. And there's 4 different types of soil on our farm. Way down by the river are the fluvians, the ones that wash in from the rivers. But then there's also Theresa silt loam, there is Lamartine silt loam, and there is Matherton silt loam. And for those of you that don't know much about soils, that means you can grow just about anything. It's really good soil. So there we are again. When we bought the farm, we bought it a little over 20 years ago, and the first thing we did was we put in a biomass shelter belt around the farm, and we planted 7,000 trees on the farm in the first year. And then we put in about 2 or 3 acres of prairie, and each year we expanded it another acre, and now we have about 4 or 5 acres of prairie restoration on the farm. We put in an orchard of about 120 trees, and that expands a little bit every year. We do gardening and permaculture in various areas of the farm. We are a DNR certified compost center. We started to raise horses and animals, and as soon as we did that, we recognized the need for pasture, so we put in some pasture on the farm. And we put in a silviculture. We worked with a young gentleman who does silviculture, grafting, growing trees, and we have quite a diverse arrangement with this fellow, growing nut crops and fruit crops and things of that nature, woody, useful plants. And then we have an energy design center that we do research on gasifiers and rocket stovery and things of that nature. And then we built our home on the farm. Another perspective, when we put the farm in, or when we bought the farm, we put in a bunch of swales, and a swale is kind of a little mound built on a contour line to help shape and collect water, to help it flow into certain areas. And water tends to puddle in these areas, so there's intermittent ponds, which creates more diversity on the farm. And then we put in permacultural plantings around those particular areas and others. And we put in hedgerow. The hedgerow is an interesting thing. Again, it creates diversity. Wherever you have a hedgerow, you have a coming together of plant communities, typically grasslands and woodlands. And at the edge of those areas is where you have that edge effect, where you have the most diversity. So on our farm, it's only 20 acres, but we have over 2 miles of hedgerow, and it creates tremendous habitat for birds and wildlife. Also, we put in our orchard. We have our gardens. These are our current gardens on the farm. We have about a third of an acre asparagus patch that produces nearly a ton of asparagus a year. And believe it or not, you get sick of asparagus after about the first 500 pounds. And then we have the fruit and nut nursery. And mushroom, we're culturing mushrooms now, and there's about 4 or 5 places where we're culturing mushrooms around the farm. We'll talk more about that later. And then the biomass plantings for energy. Then the other thing, to access the farm, we put in a series of trails around the farm. And this is some of our ski trails, and that blue line represents just about as much as our horses can groom in any one harnessing. It's about, that's probably about a 2.5 kilometer loop. So this is what we would do the first day after a snowstorm, is groom this route. And then the next day, after the horses have a chance to recover a little bit, we groom this loop, and we have about 5 kilometers of ski trails on the farm. So let's look at it a little bit closer. We have the prairie. Prairies are really, really neat areas because the prairie is the most diverse plant community on the North American continent, and it's 1,300 species nationwide. We probably have, Wisconsin has about 350 species. I think we have about 80 species on our farm, which is really quite diverse, and it's said that for every species of plant on your farm, you will have about 10 species of insects. And when you have all these different insects, you tend to have a balance so that you don't need so many pesticides and herbicides and things trying to control the pests on the farm. And it's used kind of as a recreation area for the farm. nothing is better than on a hot summer morning to walk through the prairie with a cup of coffee, enjoying all the pretty plants and flowers and things. We use horsepower on our farm. This is a friend riding Minnie through the prairie. And we use the horses for any number of things. That's my brother Dick. We're hauling some logs here on our home-built cart for log hauling. And, but we use them for any number of things. This is one-horse cultivation. I'm driving, Dick's cultivating. That's me driving a two-horse cultivator, logging, any number of things. The horses are nice, you know. Nice thing about horses is they reproduce. They are good companion animals. They can be fed off the farm for about 7 months out of the year, and if you make hay, they're almost completely free power for the farm. And we use them to groom our ski trails, and they groom tremendously, meticulously, superbly nice ski trails. For anyone who is a Nordic skier, those tracks that we get on our farm are spectacular. They really, really are. We also raise chickens and other animals. Chickens are wonderful animals. You know, a friend of mine across the street, she keeps chickens in her house sometimes, and they turn into pets. If you raise them, you know, they get to be such wonderfully friendly animals. And this particular slide needs a story. It has a story that goes with it. One of the things we practice on our farm are the teachings of Masanobu Fukuoka. You've all heard of him, right? Everybody raise their hands who've heard of Masanobu Fukuoka. One more time, do that again. That is probably the highest percentage I've ever seen in any one room of people who know who Masanobu Fukuoka is. Well, Masanobu Fukuoka says that instead of trying to find ways to do this and to do that, try to find ways how not to do this and how not to do that. And that's kind of what this slide represents. What we'll do is plant cover crop in fall, and the cover crop here is wild rye, and there's an understory of alfalfa and clover coming up underneath it. But instead of having to harvest food for the chickens in summer, you can actually plant crops for your chickens, and we roll it down with the horses in a roller and get it down to the ground, and then the chickens will actually self-harvest all the rye off the plants. And once they learn that the rye is there, they will fly up and grab hold of a stalk of grain and bring it down to the ground and peck it all off. And we've gone a couple summers from probably the beginning of the middle of June until practically September without having to feed our chickens a single thing, because they're harvesting all the grain themselves, and we just move our chicken tractor. That's a chicken tractor that is on a farm wagon, and we just roll it around the farm, and the chickens do all their self-harvesting. And I learned this technique from some Amish people, and they will actually do consecutive plantings. They'll plant winter wheat and winter rye, and when that is ripe, they'll set their animals out to harvest it, but they'll also plant wheat and barley and corn and various things so that they have a succession of growing plants coming up that they set their animals to harvest. So it's learning to work with nature rather than against it. And that's the chicken tractor. There's Henrietta. She was unfortunately killed by the neighbor dog with all of her chicks, but just the sweetest chicken you ever did want to see. These are some of our chicken tractors. We use the chickens as a pesticide in the orchard. We raise geese. We have about 40 geese. We've raised pigs in the past, but we never made any money on them, and it seemed all my spare money was going into growing pigs. Plus, when you do butcher them, the hardest thing in the world is to, you know, shoot one of those animals, because they become pets. You can see how friendly and things they are. And then we have horses, of course, for their usefulness as a draft animal. We did a CSA for about 12 years, and it was quite an experience. It was really a good time of my life. It was when I got to learn a lot about working with people and understanding people's needs. And probably a third of the people that became members of our farm became members because they like to walk around the farm. They like to see the prairie. They like to see the animals. They just like to come out to the farm and see part of nature. And a lot of times people, when we do tours around the farm, and I've probably done over 1,000 tours of our farm, almost invariably people will see the asparagus and they say, you know, I have a problem with weeds in my asparagus. Can you help me? And I tell them, sure, change your attitude. What is it about you that can't allow other plants to grow in your asparagus? And here you see violets growing in the asparagus, and there have been times in spring when there's just a buzz of bees pollinating ground ivy in the asparagus patch, and the best asparagus grows in the ground ivy, and it's a symbiotic relationship, I believe. But people come with misperceptions of having to do certain things to be able to be an efficient and profitable farmer. We also raise fruit. We have probably, now we probably have 200 fruit trees around the farm. We raise Asian pears and plums and peaches, not many peaches, lots of apples. And the orchard becomes kind of a mecca in fall time for our annual fall party, which we didn't hold this year, the first time in over a decade. But we usually have a couple hundred people come out, and we harvest the last of the apples, and we squeeze it into cider and let people take it home, and it's quite a party. We do these twig fences and hedgerows, and these are really neat things. I was kind of inspired to start doing this type of thing from these fences that we saw in Sweden. These are the coolest things, and when I saw those, I thought, wow, are those neat? And then I thought, I could build those. So we don't build them the exact same way, but the principle is the same. We're using just a lot of brushy stuff from around the farm to create these hedgerows. This is such a cool fence. You just slip those poles out. But here are some of our hedgerows, and these hedgerows are really neat. We've had sharp-shinned hawks hunting little songbirds, and the songbirds flit into this mass of biomass that is the hedgerow, and the hawk is flying back and forth trying to get the little birds, and you know, it creates habitat. It creates a place to rake your leaves. It creates a place to have digestion of the biomass occur, and now we're beginning to grow mushrooms in these hedgerows. We put in a geothermal cooling system this year, which we don't have hooked up yet, but we put in a couple hundred feet of these poly tubes and drove aluminum stakes through, and then we're going to be sucking air through those into the house to cool the house in summer. And that's really a big thing because our energy grid is set to, it's designed to meet peak load, and peak load is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody comes home and cranks up their air conditioner. So if we can learn to heat without electricity, or to cool without electricity, as the system is being designed to do, then you can cut the top off that peak load. And we're going to be using a thermal chimney. A thermal chimney is a solar collector, and the sun shines on the solar collector, the air heats up, and it causes a siphoning effect. The air rises and it sucks air out of the house, and the air is drawn in through those cooling ducts to cool the house. And those swales, you see those swales there, those are some of the swales we put in this year to collect rainwater, and it's an extension of our rain garden. So as the rain comes off the roof, it runs into the rain garden, but then the more extensive system of swales collects water from the hillside and channels it down to create non-permanent ponds and just keep certain areas wetter, and we're going to be planting biomass plantings on those, and probably also using our mushroom cultures to have a self-watering mushroom culture so that there's different types of hydrology going on in the farm to water things for us. And mushrooms. We raise mushrooms. We raise 3 different types right now. We're raising shiitake, and that's what we're doing here is inoculating shiitake logs. But we also raise wine cap and oyster mushrooms. And we had tremendous success this year with the wine caps and the oyster mushrooms too. We do different types of, this is way cool. This is the totem type of mushroom growing, but the only problem we had with the mushroom growing this year was the chickens beat us to them. The chickens love these things too, and I haven't decided, they don't seem to actually like the mushrooms. They like to scratch through all the litter, I think, that the mushrooms are growing in, and then that disrupts the spores. These mushrooms are growing on a log, but we also were growing mushrooms in chipped wood. That you put chipped wood on the ground, you inoculate it with spawn, you put chipped wood over the top of it, and you cause a little shade around it. And the wine caps did spectacularly well that way. The oyster mushrooms needed a little bit more cultivation, as did the shiitakes. But all in all, it was a very successful experiment. Building social capital. This is a Town and Country RC&D board. We met in our woods, essentially, and it was a board meeting, and we were doing brainstorming, and we were hanging things up. Some of you may remember this. This is Sustain Jefferson's strategic planning session. This is part of some of Sustain Jefferson's work. That's, who's that guy? Yeah, David Bloom, thank you. And he was talking about a lot of the stuff that we've actually been implementing around the farm. The geothermal heating of a greenhouse that we installed as we put in the geothermal lines for our house. This is an important slide because this shows social capital, and the Jefferson County Land Use Plan about 3 or 4 years ago had a very serious challenge to it. A person was pulling the heartstrings of the county board saying, oh, they took my property away to build a freeway, I'm going to go bankrupt, you need to change the land use plan so I can build in a favorable location. And we said, no, you couldn't do that. And the county board said, zoning committee, you take that back and you re-examine it. And then when we brought back to the county board for the zoning committee said, nope, we can't do this. This would create a precedent. If we change it here, we are opening up every rural intersection to development within the county. And the county board was still concerned, and I sent out an email to all of our friends here, and we had 13 people from this group show up on the snowiest day of the century. We had about 13 inches of snow on the ground, and people drove through that just to demonstrate their support for the plan, and everyone was willing to stand up and testify if need be. And there you see Mike Oppinger in the background, and I can't quite tell who that is with next to him. But anyhow, afterwards, the county board chair came up to me and she said, I had no idea people cared so much about our land use plan. Can you believe the people that showed up? And on tonight, it's the snowiest day I've ever seen. And I didn't bother to tell her that every one of them was my friend and, and a member of Sustain Jefferson. But it's just an example of social capital that we have here in our county. The CSE stands for Community Supported Energy. A group of people that got together after reading a study circle book to build a FEMA downdraft stratified gasifier. That's what we're looking at here. That's the first firing, the first flare that we got off of it. This fella here, I think we're going to stop here. This is an interesting story. This is Hank Roebuck. He's 93 years old. He has a shop in an old garage, and it's the most messed up, befuddled shop I've ever seen in my life. It's probably why I feel so at home there. But Hank Roebuck has like one of the first maker spaces, and people come over to his place when they need their tractors broken, and he drops what he's doing and he fixes it. And when your tractor is broken and you can't buy the part and it's no longer available in the junkyards, you go out to Hank's and he will machine the part for you and help you reassemble your antique piece of equipment. And when Hank passes, a lot of wisdom, knowledge, and kindness is going to go with him. But I think in the old days, I think these maker spaces that we're all interested in, I think that was the common thing, that every blacksmith shop and cabinetry shop was kind of its own little maker space, and it was a community center like Hank's garage where people came together to talk and chat and build things of usefulness.
He knows where everything is.
Yeah, and he knows where it is. It's an amazing place. So these are some pictures of some of the second or third generation downdraft stratified gasifier and some of the componentry that we all designed and built and put in it, and some of the good friends that have been made building these types of things. And we've done a lot of things. The neat thing about the CSE is it brings people together, and we have such a brain trust. It's not like you have people that are experts in electronics and experts in machining and experts in thermodynamics and experts in salvage and all these different people coming together, these eclectic people, but the brain trust is amazing. And like these folks here are working together, people learning skills. One gal came and she had never operated a drill in her life, you know, and she got to operate drills, and we taught her how to do different things. So it's a sharing of information and a reskilling, if you will. And, you know, the camaraderie, and when you're trying to figure something out, to have that brain trust come and brainstorm around things. I think it's why we have so many useful and interesting projects being turned out from the CSC and the gasifier therapy sessions. This is the Beast, the giant, well, it's not a giant, but it's a gasifier that is being designed and built to power a small-scale ethanol plant. Rocket stoves, all sorts of rocket stoves. It captivated our interest. Some guy, one of our members, brought that little concrete rocket stove, and we fired it up, and it had such a flame to it that we got all excited about it. And from that grew all these other types of rocket stoves and componentry that fits onto the rocket stoves. The snorkel stove here, this is designed to be put in a barrel of water or a hot tub, and you build a fire in it, and you get the fire started, and the flames will come out the end without the wood in most of the time. The V1 rocket stove. Here you see it in the lawn ornament mode. And very, very efficient types of stoves. Rocket stoves are being used in third world countries instead of the 3-rack method. The 3-rack method causes a lot of pulmonary and ocular diseases, and these things burn like with a 20th the amount of pollution and use about half as much wood. This is Sustain Jefferson entered the competition. What was it called?
The welding rodeo.
Yeah, the welding rodeo. Thank you. And this was our entry, and we took 3rd place with it. The judges didn't give us any type of added, you know, ours was the only functional thing. That was an actual rocket stove and barbecue. Everybody else was just a piece of art. But and then for 350.org, a year or two ago, we built this rocket stove / cob oven. And that was a real community building thing. We built it over at Bill Reichert's house. And it was a really good get-together. We must have had a couple hundred people come through, and people got their hands dirty and their feet dirty, and it was just a really good experience. I've also built a couple straw bale buildings. We have a straw bale building on our farm, and this was a straw bale building that I built with some other folks for Nona Bratset in the town of Palmyra. And it turned out excellently, and you know, just a huge amount of handiwork went into it, but there was such a group of people that came together to build this thing. We hired some folks to come and help with the plastering, and a lot of different folks helped with the various tasks with various things. We built stills, or at least a still. This is a Charles 804 still, and it's designed to produce between 2 and 20 gallons of alcohol per hour, and I can't tell you that we have ever actually fired the thing up, because that would be illegal. We don't have our permits for it yet. We built an oilseed press. The oilseed press is designed to extract oils out of seed crops, and it is operated with just a 4-ton press, and it really produces quite a bit of oil. This is sunflower oil we're pressing, and freshly pressed oil like this is tremendously delicious. It's much better than what you'd ever get in a store. It just reeks with flavor. This is neat. This is a top-lit updraft Clud gasifier and rocket stove. The interesting thing about this stove is it can be used in dual function. You can burn it as a typical rocket stove, feeding fuel in from the bottom, and then the reduction zone is down here, and the flames go up and fire the barbecue up on top. Or you can use it as a top-lit updraft gasifier, where you fill this particular section full of chipped wood, and you light it on top, and you put a chimney on it, and it creates its own suction and creates an extremely clean burning updraft gasifier. And then secondary and combustion air, I'll show you here in a minute. Secondary combustion air is introduced right at the crack between the chimney, the auxiliary chimney, and the top-lit updraft gasifier. One of the things that we are getting really good at is building these tube boilers. These tube boilers, this is a flare for our methane that we produce. And the gases, the biogas, the biogas comes into the thing and it comes out the top at about 700, 800, 900 degrees, but when you put those tube boilers in, it actually drops the temperature down to about 140 degrees. And that's really neat because that means it's extracting the latent heat of vaporization, which is a good percentage of the heat of any combustion process. When anything is burned, you're usually creating, in a very clean burn, carbon dioxide and water vapor. And if you can drop the temperature of the flue gases below the vapor point of water, you're capturing all that latent heat of vaporization. That was our barrel composter, and now the Bountiful Bowel. This is the last project we've really been working on, and the Bountiful Bowel is a anaerobic digester of appropriate scale, and this one is 15 inches in diameter. The tank that it sits in is 4 feet by 16 feet by about 2.5 feet high. And the good thing about this is it is going to be the basis of a appropriate scale, affordable anaerobic digester. Right now, the cheapest anaerobic digester that I found on the market is $750,000, and $2, $3, $4 million is not uncommon, and $10 million to $20 million is top end. This thing I got less than $1,000 into, and this is scalable. This is the type of thing that a person would be able to install on their farm to, if you had a couple hundred chickens or 7 pigs or 3 horses, or you don't need 1,000 head of cattle or something like that to make one of these things function. You can do very well with a more appropriate scale one. So this is a type of anaerobic digester that it can be built to scale to suit the person's need, can be replicated at different scales so that you could actually build these types of things more like 10 feet in diameter and 40 or 50 feet long, and then build multiples of them if you wanted to have something that would handle 500,000 chickens like a fella in New Zealand has done. I thought I had invented this, and then I went online and searched YouTube and found that they got them all over China, Thailand, and New Zealand, and it's a very, very cheap style. But what we're trying to do here is to create an anaerobic digester that is scalable, that can be gotten into for just a few $1,000s at a small scale, maybe a larger scale like 10 feet in diameter and 50 feet long for about $10,000 or $20,000, and then mechanized so that you could automate it. These anaerobic digesters need to have human maintenance done to them twice a day. Most anaerobic digesters, you have pumps and you have fluid movers and all sorts of other things that cause incredible price increases. And, but they're push button. All you got to do is push the button and then they go. And then the interesting thing about this is it becomes the center of an ecology center where you're beginning to combine and stack all sorts of different linked biological systems so that the gases that come off the anaerobic digester, when they're passed through an internal combustion engine to create heat and energy, you end up with nearly pure carbon dioxide and water vapor, and you can take that carbon dioxide and you can put it into your greenhouse so that you can triple the amount of production in your greenhouse, or you can bubble it through your algae tanks and triple the amount of algae that you're growing. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to understand all the different processes that we're trying to do and think about and understand the inputs and the outputs, so that you can create these linked biological systems, and then you eliminate waste. Waste is something, there is no waste actually. Waste is a resource that we simply have not figured out what to do with yet. And then put these things together so that the effluent from the anaerobic digester flows right into a cattail bed, or it flows right into an algae production pond, or it's used in your gardens or whatever you want. But the idea is to understand all the processes, all the energy and matter processes that occur in the farm so that you can grab the waste and put it to use in a secondary or tertiary production, growing worms and chickens and mushrooms and grow beds and tilapia. And the neat thing about this is when you put this anaerobic digester in your greenhouse, it becomes the utility center for your greenhouse. You need to keep your anaerobic digester at about 100 degrees. So when you put that into your greenhouse, you're going to have to be able to keep the temperature of it up to about 100 degrees. So you're going to create a thermal storage tank. And once you have your thermal storage tank, well, then you can have your solar collectors, and any excess energy, thermal energy, gets pumped into your thermal storage tank. And then with a simple tempering valve and system of valving and pumps. You can move that water to heat your tilapia, to keep your grow beds warm, to heat your house. And because you're working with methane, you can also create electricity and capture the heat from the internal combustion engine and store that back into your thermal storage tank, and it creates the infrastructure for your home and greenhouse. And then you can have your farm ecology center where you can grow tilapia and produce methane and mushrooms and all the other things that utilize the waste products from the upstream process. So the bountiful bowl, it's not just a trend, it's a movement. So, just want to say thanks to everybody for watching, and I want you to remember that when you're in the trenches and it seems like you're mired in mud and you just can't get going and it's hard, remember, you can have fun in the trenches. If you know what to look for, if you let your mind expand a little bit, you can really have a lot of fun when working in the trenches. Yeah, right. He thought this was great fun.
Puppy uppers.
Yeah, puppy uppers. Oh, shakes off.
Thanks, you're going to need a bath tonight. It was a good day for rides. So, that's all I have. Thank you very much.